You are listening to the FORSCOM Frontline, bringing you to our soldiers on the front lines of readiness. Hey everyone, welcome back to the FORSCOM Frontline. I'm Ashley and I'm your host. We've spent a lot of time talking about readiness in our last few episodes as we talked about training rotations at the combat training centers. And while we focused both on individual readiness as well as unit readiness, today we are really diving into an individual readiness topic, and one that's actually really important, and one that, if you're like me, you don't think about a lot. So joining me today is Woody Malone, and he is the FORSCOM G2 Security Division Chief. Thank you for joining me, Woody.
Ashley, thanks for having me.
So like I said, I don't think about my security clearance until it's like time for me to renew it and get a new one. And I don't think about what I'm doing and how that might affect my security clearance, but it does from what I understand. And so you're going to give us some updates on what's new. We're going to talk about some sort of things that have an impact on our clearance and some changes that are happening. So let's just start with the changes. What is new in the world of security clearances?
Well, actually, this is very timely. There's a lot of innovation as far as clearances go right now. First, the Army is going to Trusted Workforce 2.0.
Okay.
So what that means for mostly the active duty soldiers, reserve, and guard is that rather than having your clearance revalidated every 6 to 10 years, it's now processed as for continuous vetting. So the government's always looking at you all the time for anything under the 13 adjudicative guidelines.
Okay. And we'll get to those a little bit later.
Yes, we will. So it's very important for soldiers and civilians to self-report anything that falls under those guidelines that may be an issue of loyalty and trustworthiness and affect their clearance. Soldiers under Trusted Workforce 2.0 will not have instant clearances, but they will have a favorable background investigation, what we call a Tier 3. It's equatable to what is a secret clearance.
Okay.
So that's going to put them under continuous vetting. If you hear me say CV, I'm talking about continuous vetting. So that's a big impact to the soldiers. Now with that, the continuous vetting part, as somebody that's trustworthy for the government, you have to self-report incidents that may affect your loyalty, trustworthiness, and suitability.
Which is not something you really think. I know I have never thought, shoot, do I need to report that or not?
Right. So if in doubt, report.
Okay.
It's always better to over-report than under-report.
Okay.
Because openness and trustworthiness is part of that. So failing to self-report can be a violation in and of itself. So it can compound a problem and make it worse.
Sure.
And there's always a lot of stigma with people not wanting to report as affecting their professional careers.
Right. And we're going to talk a little bit about that too.
And we will, but this, when you're talking about adjudications, you talk about administrative actions. They're not punitive in nature.
Okay.
They may seem like it, but they're not.
Okay.
And that affects people as we move forward. So
you said that for our service members, we're going the continuous vetting instead of the 6 and 10 year I don't have the right word. The reinvestigation. Yes, sorry. What about civilians?
And continuous vetting is for civilians. It's for the whole workforce. Structured Workforce 2.0 affects the military primarily.
Okay.
But thanks for pointing that out. Continuous vetting affects all trusted government employees.
Okay. And so does that mean at year 6 I don't have to be reinvestigated?
Well, there's 2 ways you're put under continuous vetting.
Okay.
One is deferred. So if you're deferred, you do not have to redo your EQIP or your SF-86.
Okay.
It's only when an incident pops up that you're notified. If you're placed in as an other, and there's various reasons for that, there may be some issues in the background, or like myself, I was included in the pilot program, so I'm another. So every 6 years I have to do my SF-86.
Okay.
And it's just another chance to self-report any issues, any incidents.
Okay. Because I know the couple of times that I've had to do the whole investigation, coming up with every address and all of that is such a pain in the butt. But I noticed last time some of that was saved in there, so it was helpful.
And see, that's an interesting point, because in the old days, under and even before it was 6 and 10 years, when it was 10 years for a TS and 15 years for a secret, there's people that would update their security clearance and then they file bankruptcy.
Oh.
And, you know, if you look at the SF-86, it says in the last 7 years. So by the time their investigation renewal come out, they never had to report it.
Interesting.
And soldiers and civilians did it 2 and 3 times.
Huh. So this really helps with that specific, as an example.
So this closes that gap
Yeah.
with risk and threats, especially insider threats.
Okay. And so let's talk a little bit more about continuous vetting and the impacts that all of that has on clearances and favorable background investigations. So continuous vetting, what is happening?
So the Army stood up a pilot program 9 months ago it's called PSAP. It's a Personnel Security Accountability Program. And it tracks reporting through various sources on those adjudicated guidelines. So what happens is when the Army, and we'll call it the PSI-COE, it's the Personnel Security Investigation Center of Excellence out of Aberdeen, Maryland, and they fall under the Army Security Office, which is stood up under HQDA. They're located with INSCOM right now. They'll probably break them out later. But when an incident shows up, the individual, well, first the security manager unit has 72 hours to contact the individual and get a response back into DIS, the Defense Information Security System, saying that the individual's been notified, the first part. And the second part is if the commander or director is going to suspend local access to classified information.
Okay. So maybe this is a silly question, but how are they finding this information?
So,
can you tell me that?
well, and a lot of it's used for other resources, but it's coming from law enforcement. It's coming from human resources. It's coming from medical reports.
Okay.
National Crime Information Center, state criminal information centers, Equifax, all your credit reporting agencies. So all these are reporting.
Yeah.
And the data is just there. So when it pops up, it hits a name for an alert. And they say, okay, we have an alert on this individual.
So interesting.
It goes to the unit. And like I said, the unit identifies the civilian or soldier and say, hey, if you have this incident,
yeah,
you need to start preparing a response. At the same time, the commander or director looks at, is there a risk to national security? Do we need to remove that local access?
Yeah.
If they remove local access, you now can't get on any information system. So even NIPRNet, without a waiver from the DAA, which is up at 7th Signal Command.
So you're struggling to do your job.
Your job.
Which, I mean, and for civilians, I know that I have, when I apply for jobs, it's you have to be able to obtain or retain your top secret or secret clearance. And so I would assume, and we were going to talk about this a little bit more, but, you know, if you can't get on a computer and you can't do your job, that's probably a big problem.
Well, going past the military and Department of Defense, like you said, soldiers, civilians, contractors supporting DOD. But if you look at academia, you look at educational institutes, look at child care facilities.
Right.
They're now doing what's called a suitability check. And that's a little bit different from adjudications in that they're not determining for a clearance, but they are determining that you're not a risk to anybody or yourself. Child care workers, MWR, AFES employees, anybody really working with the public, teachers have to have that suitability check. So this is something that carries on far beyond the military.
Sure, and not something that I have thought about typically, but it makes total sense. So I want to talk about these 13 adjudications. So what are they? Financial, I think, is one of them, right?
Financial is the biggest one we're seeing right now.
Okay.
And like I said earlier, when they pull credit reports or those alerts come off credit reports, so they don't have to pull them, we're seeing a lot of individuals 30, 60, 90 days late and delinquent or more on payments. Wow. And there's a lot of things that cause that. I mean, divorce, deaths, medical issues. There's
Absolutely.
all kind of things. But if you're having issues, you have to report it. And when you report it, you're working on, okay, here's the issue. Here's why this happened.
Right.
Here's why this is not going to happen again. Here's my plan to get over this and get well. Here's how I'm going to make sure it never happens again. And that includes all the help from the Employment Assistance Program, the EAP, financial services, AER. All those folks can help people get over this stuff, if it's financial, behavioral, or whatever.
It's so interesting because I have, I care about my credit and I check it quite a bit, but I feel like that is something relatively new in my life as I have gotten older and bought houses and cars and, progressed in living. But when I was younger, it was not something that I was super concerned about. So I would assume that I'm probably not alone in thinking that. And for younger soldiers, you might not think about your credit score, but it could make a difference.
And that's true, especially for the younger generation. Just for the information technologies out there, I mean, we didn't grow up banking on our phones.
Yeah, I did. I walk into a bank and I have no idea what to do, to be completely honest.
When I say we, I mean people my age.
I know.
Okay. No. So, we didn't have that.
Yeah.
So identity theft is very real.
Yeah.
It's happened. It's happened to me. I mean,
wow.
So you activate your credit alerts on your cards,
Yep.
your monitoring.
But then you've got to be careful too. I had an email come in and it looked like it was from my credit card. I mean, I looked at all of it and I don't know what stopped me, but I was like, this is not right. And so I went into my app for my credit card and I had no notifications. And so I didn't do anything with the email, but it would have been so easy. It looked legit.
and it is. And if you fall for it, you can't be embarrassed. You can't be afraid. You got to come up and say, hey, I had this happen. And get on top of it. Work with your creditors.
Yeah.
And most of them understand this, and they work with you.
I mean, and this is kind of off topic, but before here, we were in Germany. And so when we came back, we'd been gone for 3 years. And I feel like before we left, the spam calling was not as intense as it is now. And one of the first calls I got was somebody saying my Social Security number had been, I don't know, revoked or whatever. I don't know what they're saying. And I was like, oh, dang, like I need to press the number to see what's going on. And thankfully something again clicked and I was like, this is not real. This guy is asking me too many questions that he shouldn't be asking. And so I said something to him and he hung up on me. But I know that not everybody thinks like, oh no, somebody's trying to scam me. It's easy because they're good.
Oh, they're real good. And, it's amazing with technology out there how they can make stuff look real, and even click on a link and the link looks real.
Yeah, So what is the number one reason for adjudication?
So the number one reason for adjudication is to determine if somebody's reliable and trustworthy enough and suitable to have access for access classified information, and that's adjudication. And like I said, suitability is to make sure somebody's a fit and doesn't have stuff in their closet where they may be criminal or other malicious intents.
Sure. And so I sit on a bunch of suicide prevention working groups, and this has come up quite a bit, that if I go, there's a stigma that if I go and I get behavioral health care, I'm going to lose my security clearance, or I'm not going to be able to progress in my career. And so I just want to, I want your, what is the real answer to that? Let's get down to it.
All right. The stigma with reporting mental behavioral issues. First of all, self-reporting is your best friend. If you're having issues that's affecting you, you need to talk to professional help. And I'll give you an experience on that. It was a few years ago, and I'd just come off a trip, and I was getting ready to go to bed. And like everybody else, I said, let me check social media one more time, because I cut that stuff off, unlike everybody else, when I go to sleep. So I looked on social media, and I saw a post from somebody I didn't like, and it kind of scared me. And I saw a bunch of follow-up responses. Are you okay? Call me. Do you need help? And, between somebody deciding to do something and the time they do it is very short.
Yeah.
So I just picked up the phone and called the person. And it was a security professional that was in another state, far away. So I called the person, and he answered, and I just bluntly asked him, "Are you okay?" "Well," I said, "are you going to harm yourself?" "Well, yeah." "Okay, so there's an intent."
Yeah.
"Do you have a plan?" "Well, yeah, I think as soon as I finish this bottle of Jack Daniels, I'm just going to shoot myself."
Oh.
So they answered the when.
Yeah.
So I was like, "What's going on? Talk to me."
Yeah.
So while they're talking to me, I gave the phone, I woke my wife up, gave her the phone, says, "Hey, talk to this person. Don't let them off the phone because they're not going to do anything while you're on the phone."
Yeah.
I grabbed another phone. And the one thing you cannot do is dial 911 from another state, okay?
Sure.
And then the law enforcement don't know how to get to anybody else, and I'm worried that this individual's a quick drinker.
Sure.
So I finally got 911 law enforcement in that area, got them on the way. I grabbed the phone back from my wife, and I told them, "Here's the deal. Go and lock your front door. Take your gun, put it over on the kitchen table away from you. Sit down on your couch facing the front door and keep your hands in view. The ambulance is coming, but because there's a weapon, the cops are coming too."
Yeah.
So when they get there, just yell, "I'm on the couch, my hands are visible, open the door." And just stay there, and they'll take care of the rest. So they took the individual in, got them treatment. And the whole thing is the individual was quitting smoking.
Yeah.
And had a reaction to one of the quit smoking medications that affected them.
Oh my gosh.
In about 3 days treatment, and everything's fine, some follow-ups. But this individual was a ComSec custodian. And when you talk about accesses to classified and sensitive information, there's no greater controls than people on the ComSec accounts. And it was a TS ComSec account. Nothing happened with their history. They reported it straight to the security manager. When they did their SF-86 interview, their reinvestigation, they talked about it then.
Yeah.
And there was no delay in the re-granting of the access to TSSCI, top secret sensitive compartment information.
So I know somebody who and I know that what she was told was not right, but she had gone to the doctor and was getting on some medication for depression. And they were like, well, you know, if you get on that, you could lose your career, which I understand I don't think is the right answer. But she was like, oh my gosh, they're saying this to me. And so I guess my question is, you know, at what point is there a chance that you could have that something might happen to your career or your clearance?
The thing is there's always a possibility of a chance happening. Okay. But that chance is greater if you don't report it. Right. But even worse than that, if you have an underlying issue that you're not getting treated for or the proper treatment because you're afraid of taking a specific medication, then you're putting your life at risk on something that may or not be true. Right. I know of very few medications by themselves, if any, legal medications. Yeah. I'm not talking about, you know, the holistic healers and self-medication, but that would cause somebody to lose their clearance. Okay. Matter of fact, I've been to DOD adjudications course, and, you know, I like to ask silly questions that I do too. You may wind up once in a while. And that's, you know, hey, if I'm taking Xanax, will I lose my clearance? Yeah. Well, no, that's a stupid question. Okay, I asked a bunch of them. If I have Tourette's, will I lose my clearance? Well, during your seizures, are you shouting out classified information? No. Oh, you're good. Right. So it's amazing the stuff that is manageable with a clearance.
Well, and somebody once said to me too, you know, if you get to the point where, you know, there might be an issue, you've waited too long to get the help that you need. And so it's better to speak up and not be scared to go out and seek behavioral health care, because that in the end is probably the better option than, you know, who knows what.
Exactly.
But so other adjudications. So, you know, what about DUIs and, you know, all of that sort of bad stuff?
So you have the criminal aspects when you start talking about a DUI. You have traffic incidents. Whenever there's an adjudication issue, they look at the total person concept, the whole person concept. Okay. Is this a one-time thing? Were there circumstances leading up to it? how long ago has it been since that has happened? What steps has a person taken to overcome this issue?
See, I think that's really interesting too. Like, so if I mess up, you're not just gonna look at that one thing in my entire life that happened. You're gonna look at the whole picture.
Right.
Which I think is really important because we all do go through things and things happen.
And we do, and life happens.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's stuff that's brought against us or accused against us that we're not even guilty of.
Sure.
But if that happens, you report the accusations, and then the final adjudication will be based on the final rulings of the courts, and then, like I said, everything else. Traffic offenses. If you go through Virginia and you're going 80 miles an hour or 20 miles over the speed limit, that's reckless driving in Virginia. That's not a traffic incident. They're taking you in for a felony. Reckless driving. You want to go in front of a judge that day. If you can't secure about $5,000 bond, they're going to put you in jail.
Wow.
So you look at something as simple as a traffic accident. And I bring that up because reporting traffic offenses used to be $300. Well, inflation, they've taken that up to $5,000. But if there's a pattern of those traffic offenses, then that's...
Sure.
But, the thing with a DUI is, okay, let's say you got a DUI. Well, you're going hunting, so there's an unregistered weapon in the vehicle. There's an open container. You hit a stop sign and kept going.
Yeah.
So now it's not a DUI. It's 4 charges.
Right.
Or points against adjudication.
Right. So if something's happening, it's not necessarily because it's one single thing, but, things add up. And looking at, like I said, the whole picture of the incident.
Right. Now, there's some things that, if you go to jail for, you're probably not going to retain a security clearance or a favorable background investigation.
Or stay in the Army, for that matter.
Or stay in the Army, or or as I call it, the Army family. So your
Sure.
Army civilians, contractors,
Absolutely.
and things like that.
Absolutely. So first I want to start with, how do I self-report? Because I will be honest, I don't know.
There's 2 people you need to talk to, your commander or director, and then your security manager.
Okay. So
here in the headquarters, each director has a security manager,
Yep.
and they work with my security team.
Okay.
Here at FORSCOM headquarters, I have Miss Ina Sanabria and Miss Kayla Nesbitt, and they are my PSAP managers,
Okay.
and they are the most knowledgeable personnel on all these ongoing changes. And they work with people throughout the command every day on making sure that they file timely and proper actions to maintain
Okay.
their clearances.
Okay.
Because we're here for the soldiers and civilians of FORSCOM.
So, random question. So, with self-reporting, should I also be self-reporting? Maybe it's not self-reporting after I ask this, but like if my brother-in-law got arrested, is that something that I need to report?
There's a thing for associations.
Okay.
But that's if you're actually involved with gangs and things like that.
Okay.
If you have members of your family that are doing stuff they shouldn't, especially if they're not even in the same household, it's not really a self-reportable incident.
Okay.
I wouldn't be riding with them a lot, and
Maybe put some distance
holding
in
packages for them and things like that. But
okay.
we all have
Fair
those
enough.
family members. I'm just saying.
I mean, you're not wrong. That's funny. All right. So what about, I understand that there's an appeal process. So I know some of this question is going to be human resources. But like I said before, if I get hired under the condition I have to have a security clearance, and then, something happens and it is revoked, can I appeal? What can I do?
All right, excellent question. So we talked about the commander making an initial determination, the incident investigated, then it goes back to CAF, and they'll give a determination on whether their suggestion you keep your clearance or lose your clearance.
Okay.
If your clearance has been revoked, there is an appeals process.
Okay.
And there's 2 ways you can go. You can go through the Defense Office Hearing and Appeals, which we call DOHA, and that's where you actually appeal in front of a judge. Now, it's not a legal judge, but it's a judge in the matter. So it's not like you're going to the circuit court to appeal. This is a person identified as a judge in these cases.
Okay.
Or you can appeal through the Personnel Security Appeals Board. and that's what most people do is they submit written appeals to the appeal board with documentation. The other thing I tell people, have letters of recommendation.
Okay.
You know, if you're the good person you say you are, have letters from, you know, your spiritual advisor, have them from your commander, people that know you, anybody in the community that'll stand up and say, hey, this person's really a good person. They just had one bad thing.
Yeah. So I feel like we have unpacked a ton of stuff, and there's a ton of information that we just covered. But what did we miss? Is there anything that we missed?
So we talked about the background investigations. We talked about affecting the private sector.
Yep.
We talked about the appeals process, the difference between adjudications and suitability. I think there's one thing we talked about before when we're discussing maybe doing this, and that's, you know, do I lose my job? Do I lose my MOS?
Yeah.
So, and that's where we talk about, okay, security and adjudications and clearances, that's administrative. The fact that it determines whether you have a, I call this C, significant emotional event. CE is eye-opening thing that affects your life.
I like that.
That's going to be up to your supervisors, commander, directors, human resources, and I always throw legal in there because, you know, the military really doesn't do anything without getting a legal opine on it.
Okay.
So the commander director, they'll weigh in whether you should change MOSs or civilian jobs or be put out. HR will look for other positions for you or put a panel together or hearing for that, and then the final product will be weighed against a legal authority.
Okay.
So when I had employees, and the best example is I had a nuclear reactor at White Sands. And if you're guarding a nuclear reactor, minor things now become big things.
Sure.
And it's called the Personal Reliability Program that personnel had to meet the standards of. And if for any reason they didn't meet the standards, we first pulled them off-site, of course, notified them. If the process HR says, no, this will never happen again, and they'll never get their suitability back, okay, you go back to the person and say, I need an updated resume from you with all your skills, because we're going to look for a position locally for you, then see if there's one that may be filled. And if not, then you look at separation from federal service.
So, but at least it's not like, well, you don't have this, you can't do this anymore, you're out. I mean, we're not throwing anybody out on the street right now in that example.
Right. I mean, like we said earlier, there's things that's going to impact you. Like here at the headquarters, you have to have a favorable Tier 3 investigation to come in the building.
Yeah.
So if your access is revoked or suspended, you're not going to work out of Marshall Hall. You know? So we have to find workarounds for that, working with leadership.
And like you said, too, the computer. I mean, how many of us spend all day on the computer? That's what I do most of the time when I'm not in here doing this. So to not have access to a computer system would be detrimental.
It is. And then, you know, if you look at, I work on tactical systems. Well, that includes tactical systems. Even if they connect to the NIPR or SIPR or JWIGS at some point, the thing is that data will leave that standalone system and connect somewhere. So that's still a trust suitability thing.
Interesting.
So it's any IE systems.
Well, you enlightened me a ton on things that I just had no idea about, especially like self-reporting. Honestly, like I'll be honest, I don't know that I have anything that I should have self-reported, but I have not. I have not. But even the whole behavioral health thing, I think that's so important to talk about. And I don't think it's talked about. I think we're trying to talk about it more, but there is still such a stigma that if I go and I get help for something that I'm going through, that I'm going to have an issue with my security clearance. And we're debunking it. Not true.
Not true.
All right. I appreciate that. Well, I appreciate your time too. Thank you for doing this. I think we at least glossed over some of it and touched on some key points. I think that there's probably a lot more that we could talk about. And maybe we can do that down the road too, dive in a little bit deeper.
That'd be awesome. and I encourage, people with questions, contact your security manager.
Okay.
If you don't know who your security manager is, contact me, contact my staff. We will help you.
And you can always contact me, and I can point you in the right direction too.
That's right.
All right. Well, thank you, Woody. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Ashley.
All right. And we will be back next week with a special episode to highlight Women's History Month. And in the meantime, you can check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And you can also find us on YouTube to watch full video episodes of our podcast. We'll see you next time on The Frontline.